Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining and looking forward to chatting with you all about our stories.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mariya. We're also joined today by our colleague, Amy Hill, who will be talking about the digital storytelling methodology. Amy, feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really happy to be here. I work with StoryCenter, and we've been a long time, multiple years partner now with Sahiyo on this wonderful project, Voices to End FGMC.
Great. Thank you both so much. And finally, we're so honored to be joined today by 4 of our storytellers, Maryan, Dena, Ibtisam, and Nevin. We'll be seeing all of their stories alongside the 4 other stories from our spring 2022 Voices cohort. Additionally, we also have live captioning enabled. So if you would like to see a live transcript, please click on the button saying live transcript at the bottom of your screen. So just for a little bit more context about today's event, Sahiyo has been working to end FGMC in Asian and other communities around the world since 2015, and StoryCenter is a US-based organization that specializes in supporting individuals and organizations in using storytelling and participatory media for reflection, education, and social change. And both of these organizations believe that storytelling can play a powerful role in raising awareness and changing norms. The Voices to End FGMC project supports those impacted by the issue to tell their own stories through their own perspectives in their own words. So now I'm happy to hand it over to Mariya for the next couple slides.
Thanks so much, Kate. So just to give a little more context, if we could go to the next slide too, that would be wonderful. So the overall goal of the Voices Project is really to build a cadre of survivors and or advocate voices willing to speak out against FGMC or female genital cutting / mutilation as a way of really looking to shift social norms and supporting communities and advocating to end the practice. And as mentioned earlier, it is a joint digital storytelling project by StoryCenter and Sahiyo. We started in 2018. And at that time, our organizations launched an inaugural digital storytelling workshop that brought together FGMC survivors living in the United States to really surface their personal experiences and help highlight that this is an issue that also occurs in the US. Since that time, we have hosted 5 additional workshops, including 3 virtual workshops, and we've hosted these with participants from all over the world for a collection of close to 60 stories at this time. And mentioned today, we're going to be watching our latest 8 videos from our winter cohort. And overall, these stories really have been utilized and have been helping elevate the conversation of FGMC globally. And they've been used through distribution, screening events to train frontline professionals on how to provide supportive care to FGMC survivors as well. And throughout the event, we're going to give you also just more detail about the workshop. And as Kate mentioned, you'll be hearing from some of the storytellers at the end. But first, we wanted to share some news with you all about a new website that we have launched to highlight this project. So if we could just go to the next slide. Great. So this website really is based on feedback that we received over the years from various storytelling participants as well too. That would be wonderful to have a centralized location where we could have all of the Voices videos up, information about the project and the program, the impact it's had. You can also learn more about the storytellers themselves and why they chose to tell their story in more context. And you can find out about events and workshops that are occurring in connection to the Voices to End FGMC project. We just launched this, so we're really excited about it. And the URL is on the slide, but please feel free to visit and learn more about our project. Can you go to the next slide?
Great.
Oh, I'm just going to give it back to you, Kate.
Perfect, thank you. And I did notice some comments that there were some issues with the chat box, so that should all be sorted and everyone should have access to that. But thank you so much, Mariya, again, for a great introduction. And I'm really excited about that new website as well. So we're actually going to start today by showing Maryan's story, The Verbal Cut, from our 2022 spring cohort as an introduction to what a digital story looks like. And then we'll have Amy from StoryCenter tell us a little bit more about the digital storytelling methodology. So thank you so much, Maryan, for going first and being on our panel here today. If we can go ahead and play the video.
The day my friend told me she was not cut, I was so shocked. I was 19, she was 21. I told her that because she had not been cut, her prayers and fasting were not accepted in our faith. This is what people in the community had said to me. I also started looking at my friend with new eyes. We were told the girl who was not cut would become loose and run madly after men. We were told the organs of the genitalia grow long, making the girl walk with legs wide apart to avoid her thighs rubbing her elongated clitoris, and that she would smell bad. I often pretended to be tying my shoes so I could watch and see if she did walk that way. But there was no sign of this. She was not smelly either. 14 years later, I got the correct information. Female genital mutilation in all its types has no basis in Islam. I was liberated from the lie that it is a requirement. I decided to say no to FGMC. I took a position at a reproductive health organization to end FGM. When I was blessed with a daughter of my own, I knew she was a gift for the work I was doing to end this cutting. But I was not prepared for the challenges. Many relatives told my daughter, "You are going to smell. Snakes will grow down there if you're not cut." I got tired telling them to back off and send them packing out of my house. I felt like everything I told my daughter about how I would protect her would be overtaken by what others said about her not being cut. With all of this, she was even growing to hate her body. It hurt me to see her terrified eyes. I ended up leaving Kenya and moving to Canada to protect her. I may have saved my daughter from the physical pain of FGMC, but I could not save her from the hateful words of those who still believe in this practice. I could not save her from the verbal cut.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Maryan, for sharing such a powerful story and for joining us today for our webinar. Now I'll hand it over to Amy to talk a little bit more in depth about what the storytelling process looks like.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you so much, Maryan, for starting us off. If people would like to share any reactions to that amazing piece in the chat box, please feel free to do so. If we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So I wanted to just talk for a couple of minutes about the process and rationale for working with storytelling to address FGMC. So as everyone knows, many people love stories, and certainly storytelling has become quite a big buzzword in health and social justice advocacy circles. But I wanted to talk briefly about some specific reasons for why personal stories can make a difference when it comes to supporting survivors of FGMC and furthering advocacy goals. So if we could have the first bullet point. So first, related to work at the individual and community level, research does show that telling and listening to real people's real stories can increase their self-esteem and sense of well-being, particularly people's sense of self-efficacy, which could be described as their ability to, their belief that they have agency and can handle life's challenges. So if we could have the second bullet point. So the next point is just related to how personal stories can bring across important factual information together with a perspective that draws upon emotions. So personal stories can prompt reflection on the part of viewers, as we've just seen really from watching Maryan's amazing piece. And then viewers can connect stories to their own life situations. And so this connection is really a starting point for empathy and compassion, which can then spur engagement and action to address issues like FGMC. So if we could have the third bullet point. So story sharing and listening are also really key tools of popular education. And so people, I'm sure on the webinar, may be familiar with the work of Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who believed that the development of critical consciousness, which he saw as a precursor to action for social change, must begin with close examination of where one's own experience and where it's situated within an unjust social and cultural and political environment. And so our digital storytelling approach does this by supporting people in connecting the dots between their own lives and the larger structures, so social, cultural, historical, political, and so on, in which their individual lives are unfolding. And so the approach in that way becomes kind of a springboard for further involvement or even initial involvement in social change efforts. And then the last bullet point. So those of you on the webinar who've been involved in policy advocacy already know this, but personal stories can be extremely useful tools for supporting policy education and enforcement and policy advocacy. So if we could go to the next slide. So we wanted to just talk really briefly about, now that we've seen one of our stories, we wanted to talk briefly about how that story actually came into being and talk about our methodology at StoryCenter. So the first bullet point really looks at the initial focus of the workshop, which is supporting participants in identifying what specific story they wish to share. So of course, because it's such a short form, it's not a medium where you could tell your whole life story. So we support people in zeroing in on a specific story. And we do this by showing examples of stories that have been made in previous workshops and going over one of our core curriculum methods at StoryCenter, which is called the 7 Steps of Digital Storytelling. And then comes what is really kind of the heart of the workshop, which is the story circle. And this, of course, owes a huge debt of gratitude to Indigenous communities globally who, for millennia, have shared stories in small groups to transmit information and education, connect with one another, and so on. And so our approach is kind of a modern adaptation of that, where people take turns verbally sharing their stories and receiving support and input and feedback from fellow participants and facilitators. So if we could go to the next bullet point. Oops. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that all the points were already up there. So let me talk about the next phase of the workshop, which focuses on developing and audio recording short scripts. So based on the feedback people get in the story circle and then supported with one-on-one conversations with facilitators and so on, storytellers draft and refine their stories to focus on what they feel comfortable sharing. And then for the audio recordings, we don't use video cameras, as you probably noticed from Maryan's piece. It was just a voiceover narration illustrated with images. And the reason for that is that people often get nervous when they're being filmed, or they may prefer not to show their image and so on. So instead we use simple audio recording equipment, such as might be used for recording pieces for radio or podcast. And then the next phase focuses on images and editing. So we support participants in gathering images they may have, in taking photos and video clips that can work with their stories. Sometimes they create original artwork, and sometimes volunteers and artists create visual images for them, such as with Maryan's story. And then we guide our storytellers through a simple hands-on video editing tutorial that shows them how to create a rough draft of their story using the wonderful cloud-based editor WeVideo. And then lastly, we always end the workshop with a screening of all the stories. And so this is a way of kind of bringing closure to what unfolded over the course of the workshop, beginning with the story circle and then ending with the completed videos. And before we go to the next story, I just wanted to stress that all of our work at StoryCenter, including our work with voices, is rooted in StoryCenter's ethics guidelines, which stress above all the need to protect and enhance storyteller well-being through a really careful living consent process and ongoing engagement with workshop participants. And this screening today is part of that ongoing engagement. All right, back to you, Kate. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Amy, for that wonderful overview of StoryCenter's methodology. So now we're going to go ahead and show you all the rest of our cohort videos. We'll be showing these next videos back to back. So during this process, please feel free to type any reflections or thoughts you have in the chat box. Additionally, we do recognize that some of the content in these videos can be triggering. So if at any time you need to take a step back from your computer, we really encourage you all to do so. So if we can go ahead and watch the next video.
As of 2020, estimates are that at least 200 million women and girls have experienced female genital mutilation. This statistic makes me question if I, a trans non-binary survivor of FGM, am real. From language to resources, all aspects of FGM, the before, during, and after, assume an FGM survivor has and always will be a cis woman. I came out as non-binary around the same time I talked openly about my experiences as an FGM survivor through my poetry. At one reading, a woman snapped her fingers and hummed at me when I introduced myself as trans non-binary. She later cried over my shoulder, calling me a powerful woman. At another event, I shared with the organizers that I didn't know if I fit into the gender statistic they planned to open with because I am trans non-binary. They introduced me to a crowded room as one of 200 million girls. I know that when I hear the pronouns she or her, it's my cue to act like a woman. She is asked about future birthing complications as a mother. She is attached to the same statistic that denies me of my personhood. At one point in my life, I convinced myself that she, her was a reclamation of the girl who died on the metal table when I was cut. An assurance that she survived along with me. But the truth is, sometimes she can feel like a white flag. An exasperated sigh after a person calls me a strong lady. An uncomfortable silence when my friends call me a girl when naming what happened to me. I constantly remind myself that out of all the people who attempt to call me things I am not, I'm the only one who knows what happened to me. I was in that room. I was the one left with the blood that spilled. I was the one who saw a life that would be more than this pain.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Dena, and thank you for joining us today on this panel. So if we can go ahead to the next video. Yeah, if it would be possible just to go to the next slide.
Sorry about that. My computer is not letting me switch to the next.
I was kept in the dark about the planned violation of my body. The sudden attack of being stripped of undergarments, pinned down and cut. My mother and aunt, accomplices to my terror as I implored them to stop it. Later, they mocked at my sensitivity and narrated anecdotes about others in the family who had it done too. They said, "You will My mother and aunt, accomplices to my terror as I implored them to stop it. Later, they mocked at my sensitivity and narrated anecdotes about others in the family who had it done too. They said, "You will forget it in time." I wish this was true. I remember wanting to be soothed, wanting to make sense of the pain in my body and my heart at being betrayed. Perhaps it was my need for understanding, trust, and safety that led me to become a psychotherapist to help others heal. I also wrote an academic paper on the psychosexual aspects of FGMC to get across the invisibility of this issue. I discovered that if talking about trauma or sex is taboo, both together can be toxic to intimacy. In counseling, I learned with my clients and encouraged them to allow their bodies to experience touch playfully, with loving consent, and with a willingness to have open, honest conversations. Perhaps this was my way to reclaim my own innocence. Speaking to family and some friends in the community about FGC had been met with stoic silence and apathy. In speaking with professional colleagues, I was met with sympathy because it was alien and unrelatable to them. Perhaps I was seeking empathy. I had to pause and reflect. The accumulation of secrets I held and my own silence had trapped me in a cave I believed to be a haven. I asked myself, why, having spent years leading many people to the other side, why are you stuck? The answer came in stillness. Being truly witnessed is so important. The courage to be alongside others in vulnerability and held with compassion. I see you. I hear you. I feel you. Perhaps these few words are enough. If not these words, a sacred presence to trust, an opening to light that I've been scared of again and again, until now.
Another really powerful story from you, Ibtisam, and thank you again for joining us for this panel as well. Now we can go ahead and watch the next video.
I had been preparing sociology notes on violence against women when I came across female genital mutilation. I was shocked that such a violation happens to women in Africa. My mother said, "It was done to you too. What's the big deal about it?" Her reaction shook me even more. I became furious at the world. My mother explained that on the 40th day after a girl is born, a woman from Ossa community, which is a lower caste among Kerala Muslims, comes to shave the child's head and perform sunnat. She told me she hadn't even known about it until I cried, and her elder sisters and mother smiled. My aunt said, "You are an unmarried girl. You should not be talking about this." I had called her because she is well versed with the religious text of our community and she has formal education in law. She is also a political representative in Gram Panchayat. I was hoping for an explanation of the ritual. Instead, she yelled at me. My uncle told me, "This does not exist among us. your mother is mistaken. Not ready to let it go, I had reached out to him as he is a religious leader. Again, I was shut down. One of our Maulas claimed that no man can satisfy women, so Sunnat is done to reduce women's sexual needs. He gave me this absurd explanation with no religious and rational backing. Still, I kept asking people around me for an explanation. They either said that Sunnat does not exist or that it is an adaptation from African cultures which rarely happens in Kerala. And yet, I came across a handful of survivors from my community who are scared to share their stories with the world. To act against any form of violence, first we need to establish its existence. I'm still struggling to convince those who chose not to see.
Thank you so much, Nevin, for the courage and bravery in sharing your story. So if we can go on to our next videos.
When I was 10, my mom and I spent a lot of time watching Malay TV shows. I remember scenes where a woman had to be ready to serve her husband's dinner as soon as he came home, or where she was criticized for not completing all her chores. As we watched, I asked my mother, why are women treated like that? She had a way of justifying it. Although her words and her face expressed acceptance in her explanations, I wondered why she always looked away from me. One day, I learned a cousin had gotten circumcised. I asked, wait, do girls get circumcised? My mom said, yeah, you were too. All girls and women in our family are. I learned boys get it done young and there's almost always a feast. It's very festive and supportive. I wondered why my circumcision was kept hidden. Then I asked my mom, why did I get circumcised? She said, so you will not be a wild girl. She meant promiscuous, out of control. I caught her reassuring look, but again, she looked away from me. I more or less forgot about it until I was 18. I was at the sex education workshop and they touched on FGMC in Singapore. And I remembered, oh, this is a thing. My stomach was queasy. I couldn't accept it. A few weeks later, I was in my mom's room. Malay dramas were on the TV again. I tried to put on a neutral face and asked, Mama, why are girls circumcised? Her response was like deja vu. My heart was racing and my palms were damp as I listened. I nodded in understanding, but my reality of gender and sexuality didn't match her expectations. I told myself, my mother thinks it's normal, and our culture validates that. But maybe the culture is wrong. As I left the room and shut the door, I kept thinking back to her look of reassurance, the one that manages her anxieties of raising a Malay Muslim daughter.
Great. If we can go on to the next video.
Wearing Little Mermaid light-up shoes on my feet and holding a Cookie Monster doll in my hands, I walked up to the clinic. I saw several other girls who I knew there who had scared expressions on their faces. I thought we were there so my sister and I could get a shot. A little while later, they called my name. I was led into a small room and somehow I instantly knew what was about to happen to me. I screamed and cried and tried running out, all while wailing, "They are going to cut me. They are going to cut me." But they held me down. It happened, and I walked out of that room dumbfounded. I locked away that memory for over 13 years. It only came back to me when I was sitting in a college class and the topic of female genital cutting came up. I could feel my facial expression change from happy to confused to sad. It was like a time capsule had been opened and all the memories of that day came flooding back to me. And then I came back to my present in the classroom. The students around me were asking questions about the practice. Why does it even exist? Does it happen in the US? Do people even remember it? I slowly raised my hand, and as soon as I was called on, I said, "FGC happened to me when I was a little girl." I took a deep breath. I thought, if they are asking me questions, maybe they are willing to learn. Not knowing what would come my way, I anxiously told them I was willing to answer any questions they had. I'm not sure why at that time I was willing to be so open about it. Maybe it's because I wanted them to know it's harmful and needed to be stopped. Or maybe I didn't simply think of anything and just randomly said things because I was connected to it. But since then, I've actively advocated against female genital cutting, and I will continue to do so. May this practice end for good.
Great. We can go on to the next video.
Wearing Little Mermaid light-up shoes on my feet.
Why do you think they're doing this to us? Is it because we're part of the Pora community? We should stand up for our own community. That's what echoed in my family's WhatsApp chat during the Michigan FGM case. In case you didn't hear about it, back in 2017, a doctor from the Pora community was charged under a federal law that bans the practice. There were several of us in that WhatsApp group. When we were young, my cousins and I talked about Khatna. I know they had it done, but during this chat, they said nothing. I waited for the chat bubbles to pop up, for someone to say, Khatna is not right. Nothing. And I said nothing either. Nothing about the shame I felt all my life. Nothing about how I can still remember the feeling of being held down and cut and the hurt between my legs. Nothing about the emotional and physical pain I still feel. How unfair it is. How it is not required in Islam. How not every Bora girl gets it done. I said nothing. 4 years later, I often think about that chat. I think about how hard it is to talk about Khatna, to be a member of a community and speak up against something many people in the community were taught to believe in. I want to believe that it is not a sin to stand up against the practice of Khatna. I want to say what was done to me was wrong. What was taught to my family was wrong. It was a betrayal of our trust. My khatna was not just a nick. It was a deep, life-altering wound. One that does not heal with time. While I never did post anything like this in the WhatsApp group, I decided to talk to my parents and my sister. That conversation led to other conversations with family and friends. I'm still not sure if I've changed hearts or minds, but I do hope these conversations spark change and allow others to speak their truth.
Great. And so if we could go on to our last and final video.
I'm visiting India at 7 years old. All dressed up in a red dress with white frills, a sparkly necklace, and earrings. I'm surrounded by family members, and the thal is filled with delicious food. This is either a party to celebrate my khatna, or to make my 7-year-old brain forget the pain and confusion I experienced a few days ago. I honestly never asked. I was raised in the United States in a Dawoodi Bohra Muslim household. This duality often weighed heavily on me. I appreciated the rich culture and sense of community my family so effortlessly immersed me in. At the same time, I wanted to do and experience all of the things that seemed forbidden, like the freedom to wear what I want and voice my own opinions about what I was taught in madrasa or masjid. No matter how American I appeared in my accent, the music I listened to, the friends I kept, I carried a physical reminder that I am different, that I am other, that I am not afforded the same freedoms as most of the women around me, that I am cut. At a young age, Khatna taught me that my body did not belong to me. On a family trip, I was brought to my aunt's clinic where she was giving me a tour. I was suddenly lifted onto a table, my legs pinned and pants pulled down. I must have been given a sedative because I went to sleep. I woke up in a room in pain. My mother was there. I asked, "Mummy, what happened?" I don't remember what she said after, but she tried to appease me. As an adult, I am choosing to work toward ending the practice of female genital mutilation and hope to find healing in the process. I am choosing to take back my freedom. Now, my body belongs to me.
Great. So a big thank you to all of our storytellers, and those are our newest videos from our 2022 spring cohort. And thank you all again for reflecting and responding in the chat box. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A portion with our panelists today. And with that, I will hand it over to Mariya to take the lead. We can go to the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Kate, and thank you to all the storytellers again. Before we go into the Q&A, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that these stories are powerful, but also heavy. And we're glad that you all are here to hear them, and it's important to do so. But if they have brought up emotions and feelings for you, please take some time to care for yourself as well. But with that in mind, we do want to transition to our Q&A portion. And I want to thank all of our storytellers that are here today. So Maryan, Dena, Nevin, and Ibtisam, thank you so much for joining us and being willing to share more about your experiences. And with that, I think we can maybe turn off the slideshow just so we can see all of our wonderful panelists too. Great, thank you. So I wanted to ask my first question to perhaps Ibtisam and Maryan, if you'd be willing to talk a little bit. Can you describe what the storytelling process was like for you? Ibtisam, would you like to go first?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if Maryan was taking the lead. I think for me, the process was pretty magical from the time we kind of gathered, as you know, what Amy said, from just the entire, you know, from the first gathering where we were made to feel comfortable. And it seemed sort of unbelievable that how we would actually produce a video, a 3-minute video with so much to share, but that each process, like, you know, we were just over the weeks, you know, the building on like the foundation, and we got comfortable, and just the visioning aspect, it just seemed very, very so beautifully, you know, done, and each session was planned. And I think the cohesiveness, the fact that we all felt we were in this together, I think that was really, really powerful as far as the storytelling, just giving each other space to speak our story the way we intended to. Yeah, that was my experience.
Maryan, would you like to share?
Thank you very much. This was a very important opportunity for me. I really feel honored that I was able to be part of this cohort. I think I was sharing with Amy some times back that for a long time I harbored the interest of wanting to be in the StoryCenter. There was even a time I was searching them up and seeing if I could actually go to Berkeley. and so this was really powerful. And as Ibtisam says, I think one of the very first things that hits you is when you are told the story is going to be 3 minutes, like it just looks, I don't think there's anything I can say in 3 minutes. But as the days rolled, and as Amy in her very calm and you know, in knowledgeable nature passed on you know, the strands and the, you know, the ways of doing this, it became very clear that a small chip out of your sea of stories can actually stand on its own to be a very powerful story. And what was so powerful for me also was being able to see myself in each and every of the stories that were being shared, but yet again, each and every story being unique in its own way. And so it's a very powerful opportunity. I think I would encourage anyone, if you are here, if you're working on FGM in any way, this would be a platform to really just, we need more voices out there. So thank you very much for that.
And actually, I think I will invite Dena or Nevin, if you would like to add anything, feel free to this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think throughout the process, because of the fact that it is within like a 3-minute time frame, it really was about parsing what was important, not necessarily not was not important, but more so of honing in on what was the point of our story, what is the intention. And I think because of that, it allowed me to focus on what is the main purpose of me telling my story, and what do I want out of this, and what do I want out of sharing it. So that kind of allowed me to like hone in on those details. That kind of helped in that regard.
Nevin?
I never thought that I'm good with technology, and when I joined this, I was like, oh my god, I'm going to do really bad. But everyone made it so comfortable, and they made it feel that it's an easy process and a powerful way through which I can share my story and make it get to more people. And it was empowering for me in multiple ways. In technologically, even if it's a small video, I learned a lot, and yeah, and it gave me a medium to tell my story, and to know that there is a sisterhood, and
there is a lot of people who is fighting for it, and to give a hope that one day we'll fight and we will win. Yeah, that's it from myself.
Definitely, and I think we're all striving for that and aiming for that as well too. I know for me, so I myself actually did a story as well, and before Amy and me collaborated to create this project, and one of the most meaningful things for me is just, and has been when I've seen the other workshops as well, is just the process people go through, and at the end, the story they come out with, and how they are able to really share that one story that they want to tell, because we're all consist of many stories. And our, even as survivors, our FGMC stories are very layered and diverse as well too, but being able to help highlight what is something that's of significance and showing just how complex the issue of FGMC is, I think is important. So with that in mind, I do want to ask the question, what was the most meaningful point or process for all of you during these 6 weeks of the virtual workshop? And Maryan, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for me really was being able to show the other side of FGM. We always often and for all purposes and intent focus on the cut and the damage and all this. Yes, that is definitely the crux of the matter. But I really wanted to like bring out how even words are also as powerful. They cut deep, they wound, and they leave lasting pain. And so for me, I think having been able to have fashioned that story and the way it came in together, and as many of you know, and maybe just for the purposes of our listeners, I became unwell in the process, and so the whole illustration and how it just sort of like made my story, weave together. That was really, really powerful. I think it's kudos to that illustrator also. I would have really loved to be the person who was talking and speaking, because as I keep saying, I'm not someone who's afraid of talking about FGM, but definitely it became clear that my body is afraid of talking about it, and I'm so happy that there was resource that's available to be able to support the check-ins, that Amy and yourself and others were doing on me and everyone else, and then also just being ready to like hold everyone's hand. I think that was so profound. There was no time I felt I was alone. There was no time I felt I was struggling, apart from the very first butterflies of the first day of thinking, oh my goodness, 3 minutes story. And then later on thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do editing? I am not tech savvy at all. But I think a lot of the things that really stand out for me is the support that was there, the space. You feel you're just like among peers, among friends. I felt I was among my daughters, and among sometimes I would see myself. Some of the storytellers were so young, like half my age, but I would see myself in that story, and so it was a whole, I think, coming together of a lot of goodness and support and sisterhood and humanity, and people who really like wanted genuinely to see one of the greatest atrocities that is facing children, the girl child to end. So I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity.
Thank you for opening up about that as well too. To our other speakers, would any of you like to add on or talk about what is a meaningful moment for you in the entire workshop process? I should also just add that our storytellers they were very global in this last cohort. So we were actually managing many different time zones and having to be flexible. We love doing that, and the virtual format allows us to do that, but it can be a little bit complicated too when we have so many time zones to do that. But I think we tried our best to make sure that everyone felt part of the project too. Okay, well, I'll go on to the next question. What impact did the workshop have on you during or after it was over? And I know your stories are just being released now too, but Dena, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I know granted this is the media public, while this is the public screening, I think being able to like have the video completed and sitting with the fact that, oh, this is going to be released for some time, I think it was emotional in that, at least on my end, because I made the decision to have visual elements that were my actual face and to associate myself with my identities in its entirety of being non-binary and being a survivor of FGMC. I think there was a particular vulnerability that I was always afraid of, in that I think while usually I go into writing, I often tend to hide behind the writing aspect and just hide behind a series of texts. And I usually just hide behind maybe an author photo that's somewhere at the bottom of an article. But this was the first moment where I realized, oh, this is going to be the first time that I'm talking about my story and my full face is kind of showing through. And I think because of that, I think it allowed me this sense of, while like being very, very vulnerable, and that like, okay, like I'm associating my face with like these two intersecting identities that often are seen at odds with each other. At the same time, it kind of just gave the workshop overall, and like after it ending and after completing the video, there's also a strength in that vulnerability, and that, okay, like this is a moment where I got to choose how I can present myself, and realizing not only, oh, I have agency in my story, but I also have an agency in how that's shown and how that's represented. And this was a workshop where every aspect and every process of it allowed me to showcase every part of myself in the ways that I want to, in the ways that I would like to. And there was never a moment where I had to compromise anything. I didn't have to compromise pronouns. I didn't have to compromise what I can say and what I can't say.
Thanks for sharing. And yes, definitely. I think all too often, just having worked in this field for a long time, I've heard stories from other survivors who have wanted to share, and then feeling they've shared their story and it gets cut up into sound bites, or it's not quite what they wanted to say. So that agency component is really crucial and central to our Voices project, and something that we really recognize is part of that experience and that healing for those who are impacted by FGMC. Ibtisam, I saw you shaking your head a lot. Is there anything you might like to add?
No, I think it's just general resonance, but which I feel like, you know, when we share our stories, it's for me as well, you know, because I've you know, being a psychosexual therapist, I have done that, you know, but so many of the people have shared that somewhere we have trauma, we have triggers, we have memories coming back, and it often is not, you know, we can't plan these things when they happen. So during this entire storytelling process for me, like Mariyan said, I had many dips, you know, even though I kind of, it's like, you know, the trajectory, but it still happens. And that was, that sort of changed a lot of stuff for me. As you said, it was like I share in this thing, it was the different levels, you know, but the most supportive thing was that it was about with like-minded people, you know. I never felt, I think that trust, that sense of safety, whenever you want to do something, when you want to speak up, I think it's just so important you're held. Without that, things can go really, I mean, that re-trauma of that can be really, really painful. So yeah, I'm really grateful for Sahiyo and storytelling to come together and do it in this amazing fashion. Thank you.
Nevin, is there anything you'd like to add?
There is a lot of emotions throughout the workshop. Even now when I'm hearing the stories and just being here, I can really feel the pain, and there is so much anger. At the same time, there is hope, and there is strength, and thank you for that. And thank you for creating an opportunity for that.
Great, thanks all for sharing. So related to this, the stories are coming out right now. We're releasing them 1 week apart from each other. And I'm just kind of curious of what are your own thoughts? What are your own hopes? How would you like to utilize your stories or the voices stories in general? What impact would you like to see? Or have you already thought about how you can utilize it?
Can I go?
Go ahead, please do.
Yeah, as I have mentioned in the story, Kerala, which is a state with high state of India with high GDI, gender development index, and with better gender relations supposedly, and the conversation never appears. I remember 5 or 6 years back, one person came out about FGM in a newspaper. She wrote about it, and the discussion happened for 1 or 2 weeks, and it just slowly dies. And I don't know how that happens. It's such a painful thing and such a violation of right. It's something really big, and but it just dies out in Kerala, and the discussion never sustains. And people, either you ask them, they'll either write out, they'll say it doesn't happen, or they won't respond. Whenever I call through people, religious leaders, they'll either won't pick up or they'll dismiss by saying it doesn't happen. The community is like, it just happened to few people, it's not a big deal, it happens to everyone, why are you making it a big deal? And at the same time, I always wonder how can we change this, or how can we address this? We cannot make it legally, we cannot take a legal action in the first sense. I can't file a case against my grandma and mom now. So there need to be a change at the communal level, change through conversation need to happen first. That's the only way. And we can, because considering the global and Indian scenario, we are in a stage where the community itself is facing many other flashbacks from the stage and in other contexts. So we cannot outright criminalize it, and there should be a very careful approach to it. And I really think that stories and conversations are the way forward to make sure that people realize this is happening and make it an issue, make sure that people realize that it's an issue happening and address it. And I think stories will help.
I would like to just add that for me, I want to link my story with really what could be happening. It's just my own hypothesis, and I'm just imagining. For communities where FGM is a norm, like the community I come from, 98% practice, it's norm. It's like taking water. It's like the clothes you're wearing. I'm just wondering, even if a girl is saved from the literal cut, and I want to look at girls here in Canada, for example, in the US, or for example, like, are they saved from the verbal cut? So for me, I'm hoping this is a conversation that can be taken up, and we really like delve in and see, because it is as damaging. I mean, if someone is growing up hating their body, really not feeling comfortable and confident in their own skin, feeling they are lacking something, feeling they are smelling, feeling they are ugly, feeling, and that for me is as damaging as also, of course, you can't compare the damage of the cat, but I'm hoping this is something that we can continue conversations, we can continue, people who work with young people in this part of the world, and just really be able to like see what's happening in their homes, what's happening in their communities, what's happening in their neighborhoods. Like, are they being called this demeaning, belittling, stigmatizing names? And so hopefully I can be part of a conversation, a larger conversation that really applies on that. But obviously, this is something that I will continue sharing on my sites. And as always, I expect a lot of conversations from people who are my followers from back home, and a lot of not so pleasant, but definitely things I'm prepared for. But of greater importance is what is actually happening everywhere else. Is verbal cutting something that we need to also be part of this whole conversation?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. And I think your story helps highlight that. And I'm just thinking about how I've heard many stories of when when somebody's not cut and how they're still having to pretend that they're cut in a community too, because there's shame and stigma for not being cut. And that's part of that verbal abuse as well too, not feeling like you're fitting in if you're not being cut, although obviously it's much more beneficial and something we're hoping for, that everyone is able to be free to not be cut.
Can I just add something to this, because that's the reason my video, which, you know, when I called it the cave of consciousness, but I moved it from unconsciousness to consciousness, which is because the trauma, yes, when we think of trauma, we usually think of that, you know, the physical trauma for most things, the images. But trauma is actually more about what happens. Trauma is the event itself, but more so what happens inside us. That's changed forever. So whether it's physical, mental, emotional, there's so many different, it's like a mind, body, soul change that happens. And that's, you know, when people say, oh, forget about it, or in time things, so many of our videos said that. You don't, the body somewhere remembers. And it takes a lot of unraveling to come to that. It's a belief system we're fighting. It's such a deep psyche that, you know, it's got into, that it's going to have many conversations. And until we don't start having it out in the open, it doesn't work otherwise. So yeah, that's why these voices are so important, each and every voice. Thank you.
Does anyone want to add anything else? Dena?
Sorry, I just forgot to add that given a chance, that person who has been told over and over, you're ugly, you're this, you're that, given a chance, what would happen when they can make a decision, when they can go somewhere where they can freely like get cut? So we might be gaining and then losing in the end, and that's just a wrap up I wanted to put in.
Thanks for adding.
I just want to add on top of being able to have conversations initiated and also being able to finally reimagine a world where FGMC isn't present. I think also what's super important for me with the outcome of all these videos is that there's not only an archive of survivors who are telling their own stories, but also proof that we have the ability to tell our own stories. We have the ability to initiate our own conversations. And we also have the ability to talk about the nuances of it. I think oftentimes in mainstream media, whenever we talk about FGMC, it's usually someone who's trying to play savior, who's trying to save us, who wants to tell our story, and we're just reduced to something that's sensationalized. We're reduced to sound bites. We're reduced to quotes in an article that don't really care about our agency and often end up further marginalizing the other communities that we're a part of without actually addressing what we need. And I think with these videos overall, it's kind of just proof that we have the capability to do that ourselves. And of course, we aren't the only ones, and allies are necessary. But at the same time, understanding the fact that there's so much more to us, and there's so much more with this experience than just the sensationalism of the cut, and more than just trying to reduce it to something that is considered barbaric, or again, used to further racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, etc.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I think that that's super powerful to help acknowledge that, yes, those with lived experiences are able to help speak up about this and bring about that change. And I just think you captured that very elegantly. I see there's a couple of questions from our attendees. So unless there's anything else anyone wants to add on, I'm going to read out that question. Does that sound good? Okay. So one of the questions is, how helpful and important was the support of other storytellers coming from different communities, but all survivors? Thoughts?
What was the question, sorry?
How helpful and important was the support of the other storytellers in the workshop coming from different communities, but they were all survivors?
I think for me it showed the global nature of FGMC, and for maybe people who
come from places where maybe this is still not talked about, and this, because when you're in the community, there's owning, there's like people sort of like embrace and think it's theirs, they want to protect, you know. And until I had a conversation with someone, I never thought FGM was happening in any other community. So I think it showed the global nature. And as I said before, each story was very similar to the next, but also very unique in its own, on its own. And personally, I think I'm the oldest in the cohort, and I was able to see myself in each and every like pieces of my story along each of the stories that others thought. So I think it's just painted the picture of the global nature of FGMC, and wherever we are, I think if you can have like a map and put it, will still just point out to how this is not a practice that you can give one color, one identity, or in one place. That was really profound.
Yeah, I would love other people to answer. I just want to mention that there's a question, what countries were represented? Maybe all of you can mention what countries you represent or feel like you represent too, but also on our Voices website, we actually have a map of all the storytellers and where they're located too. So just another reason to visit our website.
Kenya, Canada, Kenya and Canada.
Nevin?
India. Kerala state of India.
India and UK.
Indonesia and the United States.
And again, we had, I think we had 9 other participants. We had 9 total in this workshop. So we do have folks from other countries as well from this particular workshop, which was why time zones was very interesting to do. But yes, does anybody else want to respond to just the workshop and having all those folks from different communities represented or in that workshop with yourself? What was that experience like?
I can definitely answer that because I have tried to have these conversations as I already shared in my video with family and friends back in India. And it just was like, you know, it was just looked away, like forget about it, or there was resistance. You couldn't actually have a conversation. And I think it was the first time for me. I tried to have it professionally with some colleagues when during my training and otherwise, but this was the first time I actually had it with people who were there for the same purpose. And it was really cathartic. It was magical in many ways. And I remember even though we were having it online, and I remember because by the time we actually started our storytelling sessions, it was midnight for me. And I remember it's like, how am I going to go through this? And it was just like coming alive because just wanted to give people a big hug. I really missed that we're not there together physically to kind of hold hands. But yeah, the magic of technology that we could still manage that, and it was really supportive. So I can say that. In fact, maybe in many ways it made it more special. It made it more like. I think it made it like the heart sort of expanded more than, you know, it wasn't just this is happening in my community. So yeah, thank you.
Anyone else want to add anything? There's another question for all the panelists. Somebody's really curious to hear what guidance you would offer to other individuals who wanted to start a conversation about their FGMC experiences with their parents or other family members, especially if those family members might not seem to be actually open to discussing the practice. And I can say that I think the Voices videos are a good way to even simply sending a link. They might not watch it, but they might watch it. And that could be an easy first step to do, particularly if you're afraid to have that conversation. And I can speak from my own personal experience, if other folks want to share too, it was much harder for me to talk about this within my own family when I first started questioning and thinking about it than it is now. Not that it's always easy, but it took a long time and a long process to get that way. But some of the ways that that happened was sharing links or sharing stories as well. But would anyone else like to add or say anything about that question?
I think talking about FGMC to whichever group, whether it's your family or anywhere else, obviously calls for courage, and so I think the very first ingredient is just to have that focus on, you want to talk about this violation, and the goal is to like have people start talking about it in order to really protect girls from it. So just having that courage, it's not easy. It's not, I mean, it's easier said than done. When I initially stumbled on just information on a friend who said she wasn't cut, a Muslim friend of mine at the university, and that was like my initial shock. How are you not cut? And that was the beginning of questioning this whole, and it took me almost 14 years to really get to an understanding and a place where like I really got the information this thing had no basis in Islam. I still decided, you know what, I want to have conversations at home, and definitely I wasn't well equipped. I was not well informed. I wasn't prepared for the backlash and the dismissal and being considered crazy in the beginning. And when I now had the info, it is still a battle that I'm on. It's much easier talking to everyone else than actually my own family. And you guys can actually see from my story, it had to take me to cross the Atlantic to just get my daughter away from that talk. Because one, I was so afraid for her to be cut behind my back, but then I was also this whole talk that I could not control anybody coming and always just talking to her. So I would tell them that it's not easy, it's not linear. There's just no 1 + 1 = 2 that we can say, but I think just having that courage, being committed to it, and having slowly within the family, maybe there are people who are closer, maybe there are those who are who can first listen. I don't know, it's a popcorn thing. So courage, and go ahead and begin the conversation. That's one thing I would just say.
I'll like to add.
Please.
It's definitely not easy. I remember being called morally loose because I'm a girl. I came to know about this when I was 21. And according to them, when a girl is not supposed to talk about sexuality, her body, anything related to that. If I'm talking about it, I'm morally loose. You are not even supposed to know about this. We are not supposed to know about our body. And then how will we know we are actually cut or it happens? Unlike in Boro community, in Kerala, it happens when the girl child is 40 days old. So we will never know. And if we are not allowed to watch or explore or know about our body, there is no option of having conversation about it. And I was not, these conversations were not accepted. And I could somehow managed to convince my mom that it's a human right violation, but next day the religious leaders and other people also made her believe that it's okay, it's part of something necessary. And it's very tough. I'm still trying to figure out how to convince the people that it's not fair and it's okay for me to have these conversations. And they have actually written me off and thinking that she's a gone case. But I'm not going to stop talking. It's going to be traumatic. You're not going to hear all good things, but we somehow have to start those conversations. We definitely have to. And of course, not alone. You should find support systems. We are human beings fighting all the time, and going through the pain all the time is not easy. And the platforms like this can be your support systems, and we have to make new families and new support systems to fight and to survive.
Thank you. Ibtisam or Dena, anything to add?
Yeah, I would, I guess, like to add in regards to that question. I think I don't want to just simply be like, oh, just be prepared for the worst, but I think there is an importance in having some type of support system outside of it. And I'm saying that especially for myself, in that like even trying to initiate those conversations with my family, I definitely was turned down, and there still really isn't much progress since. But I think what was important for me in the initiation of the conversation was being able to express, hey, this was wrong. This should have never happened to me. This also should have never happened to any of us. But also having external support system, whether it was therapy, whether it was a group of friends, to know that even if I was being isolated and at some points gaslit in those moments, like I know that there's someone else that has heard me. There's someone else that is aware of my story and knows that I am not wrong in my feelings and how I've processed that experience.
Very true. And Ibtisam, anything, final words?
Yeah, I think in fact it's very crucial. I'm saying this from a very personal and a professional actually experience, because if you're not well resourced, and sometimes the re-trauma can take you back into the cave and you don't want to come out again. So it's really, really important. In fact, that is one of my visions, that what storytelling stopped, where we stopped, like our voices are heard. But if we can have an ongoing group where we can, meet almost weekly and invite people who can share and facilitate, that's my dream. If you're saying, where after this video, what? I mean, this is where I think I can actually use my professional experience as a psychosexual therapist, Anna, that if I could have some sort of tech support and not have admin stuff, I would be committed to this of, having groups that we could just meet and have that support. So I think it's really, really important. And you have to be brave about this, but be brave, but don't be stupid. Be well resourced.
Yeah, definitely think about your own needs, your own self-care. I think that's always important. So I'm going to ask if Maya, if you can put up the screen again and then slideshow. And as you're doing that, we're getting near the end. And I just want to ask all of our storytellers here if there are any final words you would like to share with those who are here today and have seen your videos. And anyone can go first.
One of the initial feedback I got, and someone asked me, was it's like, through my story, am I saying fleeing the country is like the only way? I know it's not possible for everyone. I know for me it was possible. I was an educated woman who could be admitted to a university. I had finances to come to that. Those were the privileges that I decided to reach into and take advantage of. So, but at the end of the day, each and every person has agency, and each and every person does have, and this is where privilege becomes very relative. And all we are saying is you have to do all you can. It might not be all the time like being able to, like I came for studies and I decided to remove my daughter from. So if you have that opportunity, yes, grab it. But if you don't have, you still have agency that you can reach into. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you. Other speakers? Nevin?
I think I have poured my heart out already. Yeah, but let's keep coming together. Let's keep sharing our stories, and let's keep fighting. And let's keep giving each other support.
Good words. Dena or Ibtisam?
I think I'll just reiterate what everyone said, that, it's difficult for one person to do this by themselves. Mariya, I mean, you're a perfect example, right? It's not just one person's campaign. It was a collective, the founder members came together, and it's grown from strength to strength, and more conversations. Like you can map your journey, right? From where you began and where you are today. So that's how it's going to happen. And the journey, it's not just the external journey of becoming an activist, but it's also your own personal healing journey, because a lot of stuff will come up. It's touched us in aspects which we don't know about. You know, when you start unraveling this, it's like literally layers of an onion. More is revealed. So yeah, that's the way I look at it anyway. So thank you again. And as Maryan said, it's a privilege. It's really a privilege to have this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess for me, final thoughts, I think community is so crucial, and community is so, not only in regards to just campaigning, but also just receiving support. And also, more importantly, the community is not limited to location. It's not limited to who we are simply in proximity to. And that, like, we've all created all these wonderful stories, but globally we are so very distant from each other. But yeah, we were able to delve this storytelling community. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you. We're very grateful that you all trusted us in the program and to tell your stories through voices. So thank you for that. And I think we're just going to close out, but wanted to mention a couple of things, and I'm going to pass it on to Kate, but to expand on this, but we do have another workshop coming up in the fall, and we are accepting applications for it. So Kate, do you want to give us a little more details?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mariya. And again, a big thank you to all of our amazing panelists here today. So yeah, as Mariya was mentioning, we have another Voices workshop coming up in the fall. And we are really excited to announce that applications are open for that workshop. And so this virtual workshop will be held from 4 to 6 p.m. on Eastern Time on 6 Mondays, starting Monday, October 24th through Monday, December 5th. And this specific workshop is open to survivors, advocates, and community members impacted by FGMC who are currently U.S. residents. We're hoping to host more workshops later for global participants. And so during this workshop, each participant will learn to create their own video through the use of voiceover audio, still images, and video clips like the ones that you all have watched today. And this participatory media process will be guided by facilitators from both Sahiyo and StoryCenter. And so if you're interested in taking part, we really encourage everyone to fill out this application that Mariya just posted in the chat by Friday, October 7th. And so I'll send that application link just once more in the chat for those who are interested. And please feel free to share this as well if you know anyone in your network who would be interested either. Great. So if we can go on to the next slide. And just a few more resources for everyone here today. If you would like to see a full playlist of our Voices videos, you can visit the Sahiyo YouTube channel or our new website linked here today. Additionally, we have the emails for Mariya Taher and Amy Hill up on this slide. Great. And so we are about at time. So if we can go ahead to the last slide, we just want to thank everyone again for coming to this webinar. And thank you again to our amazing speakers for their bravery and their passion in speaking out about this issue.